I'm gonna beat you into the living death.
Welcome back to Yelling About Mixed Martial Arts, the show where I yell about mixed martial arts. Amidst a month where fights began falling apart quicker than every loving relationship that I've ever been a part of, UFC 303 was quite the ordeal. As you might recall, 303 was supposed to be headlined by Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler, except Conor stubbed his toe and it made him go ouchie. Stop me if you've heard this one before.
My foot was a balloon.
Well, Conor's boo-boo would be just one of a baker's dozen of flippy-dip changes to the event, which happened right up until the doors opened to the T-Mobile Arena. On top of the cursed fight between Jamal Hill and Khalil Roundtree going through 3 permutations before ultimately morphing into Anthony Smith versus Roman Dolidze, the fight between Brian Ortega and Diego Lopez would fall through the night before the event, leading Dan Ige to step up to fight Diego on 4 hours' notice. 50K Ige is a great nickname for Dan, not only because it rolls off the tongue, but because absolute Chad Ige just doesn't have the same ring. With all the zany hijinks leading up to the event, the card itself was a slightly messy affair once it finally managed to stumble its way out of the gate. Former champion Andrei Arlovski would get narrowly swindled in his fight for a 4th consecutive loss in the promotion, leading him to getting cut from the UFC, while Michelle Waterson would call it a career after getting smothered to death by a Canadian pothead. Waterson would get a nice video package and give a touching send-off speech to close out her stay, while Arlovski would get a cuddle fest with a Slovak and a whole lot of nothing to end his tenure with the organization, which goes back to UFC 28 in the year 2000. There were a couple of nice knockouts on the card from the likes of Joe Pyfer, John Silva, and the young stud Peyton Talbot, who is already rivaling Mikey Musumeci for the world's most goated fighter with autism. Considering he's a certified Zoomer, I'm just hoping he didn't achieve said knockout with a Zyn pouch in his foreskin, but I don't think that's something they check for in the inspection zone, so I guess there's really no way of knowing one way or the other. It bears reiterating that aside from Mayra Bueno Silva getting a gash in her forehead the size of the Mississippi River, and Ian Gary doing his best Bilal Muhammad impression against MVP, the real story of UFC 303 was indeed the co-main event. Diego Lopez was supposed to fight Brian Ortega at 145 pounds, then it was changed to 155 at 4 o'clock in the morning when Brian couldn't make weight, and then Brian just up and yeeted himself from the fight entirely. Dan Ige went from watching the pay-per-view in his PJs to performing in it, putting on a fight of the night-worthy performance with Diego where, in my eyes, there was no loser. Both of their stocks rose tremendously with this fight. Unlike the panties of every woman in attendance, which all dropped quicker than a Kanye album leak at the sight of Diego's mullet, which continues to grow in power with every octagon appearance. When your girl gets stolen like a bag of Funyuns at Bible camp, all you will see in the distance is a flowing mane of manliness, and there's not a goddamn thing you can do about it. Say goodbye to Bethany, she's off to Puebla, Mexico! In the main event rematch between Alex Pereira and Yuri Prochazka, Yuri did exactly as expected, not changing a fucking thing about his approach to the sequel as he did in their original fight. As such, Alex took a slightly longer but ultimately similar route to the same destination, nearly knocking Prochazka out in the first round before completing the objective with a beautiful head kick to start the second. After the fight, Yuri said he needs to evolve himself. Well, it would have been nice if you had done that in any respect before the fight, Yuri. Ever heard of securing a fucking takedown, guy who submitted Glover Teixeira? Ever thought about putting your damn hands up or checking a leg kick, guy who already fought Alex Pereira? Had none of these ideas ever crossed your mind during your multi-week stays in complete darkness or your shirtless walks through the fucking snow? Drahi bullshit! So, all in all, UFC 303 was a wild ride that ultimately had a satisfying conclusion. The same might not be said of the ever-worsening situation Khabib Nurmagomedov currently finds himself in back home in Dagestan, Russia. Yes, Khabib has been having quite a time of it lately, all starting with his alleged tax evasion to the tune of $3 million and possession of an illegal passport. Now, the Russian government is certainly known to get creative and inventive when finding or contriving reasons to go after the country's citizens, but whether or not the allegations are true, the fact is Khabib has found himself on a list he doesn't want to be on. This would be compounded by the recent terror attacks in Khabib's home republic of Dagestan, which resulted in the deaths of 22 people. The counteroffensive launched by Russian security forces killed at least 5 of the attackers, including Ghazi Murad Kagirov, a former MMA fighter who once trained at Khabib's Eagles MMA. This would all come to a head when Khabib's gym would be raided shortly after the attacks. All of this is very bad, none of this is any good. For his part, Khabib did say that the attacker was not actually a member of the gym, which still bears the name of Khabib's coach and father, Abdul Manap. The elder Nurmagomedov had sought to use combat sports as a positive outlet to steer the youth of Dagestan away from extremism, so seeing Khabib associated with it is troubling to say the least. As a person who once quite literally sang his praises on this program, Khabib, with the heart of an eagle soaring over Dagestan, shit-talking ring girls, wrestling bear cubs, and eating tiramisu. I sincerely hope that Khabib does not harbor or foster the expansion of extremism in any form. Obviously, it would be a very real and very deadly threat to innocent people, an unwashable blemish on his legacy, and worst of all, it lends legitimacy to the hashtag Conor was right, which is a reality that I cannot bear. I already live in a reality where back-to-back Alexander Volkanovski knockouts is a thing, Khabib. Do not do this to me! For more on the Khabib situation, I highly recommend the reporting of Karim Zidan over at Sports Politica, who has been providing outstanding coverage of these events. Link will be in the description. Now, to wash the taste of murderous extremism out of my mouth, I'm going to go celebrate a place that has absolutely none of that, past or present, the good old US of A. Happy 4th of July, motherfuckers! Like, comment, and subscribe, or I'll chop off my own fingertips like Tito Ortiz cutting an onion. And for yelling about mixed martial arts, this is Thinker St. James reminding you that if you care this much about MMA, you too are a fucking moron! In honor of America's Independence Day and in promotion of Bare Knuckle FC, which he co-owns, Conor McGregor posted this meme on Instagram of Abraham Lincoln's tail of the tape versus Theodore Roosevelt. Ironically, Roosevelt versus Lincoln, a much more likely fight to happen nowadays than McGregor versus Chandler.
Change.